Oh, come on. Come on. Come on. Boy, I miss Pandemic Studios. Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2, Mercenaries 1 and unfortunately 2, and the severely underappreciated The Saboteur serving as their final release before shutting down in 2009. As is often the case in this series of incredibly popular videos, I have played most of their well-known classics. However, there is one Pandemic franchise that mostly flew under my radar, and that's Destroy All Humans, but I plan to remedy that oversight today. Unfortunately, the only game in this series I did manage to play was the one that ultimately destroyed the entire franchise, the third and final release, Destroy All Humans: Path of the Furon. Honestly, the less said about that train wreck, the better. So let's just hop right into where the franchise began with the first release title, simply Destroy All Humans. You play as Crypto of the Furon Empire, sent down to Earth from your base of operations, the Mothership, to recover a crashed Furon ship and find out just what the f*** is going on.
Attention, Earth creature. This planet is now part of the Furon Empire. Your benevolent masters welcome you.
The game takes place in the late 50s and has a blast parodying American culture, politics, propaganda, and everything in between from that era. It's the thing that makes the game stand out the most. There's even a mission early on where you have to pretend to be the mayor of a small town and convince the townspeople that all the weird goings-on is the fault of commies and definitely not little green men.
You want to know what's been going on around here? I'll tell you what's been going on around here. Communism, that's what!
It's almost a little jarring to play this in 2019, seeing as some studios today are so terrified of looking like their games have any political messages whatsoever. They'll straight up make a game about an occupied Washington, D.C., advertise it with ads that say something along the lines of, "Come and see what a real government shutdown looks like," and then deny the game has any political messaging or opinions about anything. And you know what? They also made a game about an armed religious cult in Montana that somehow wasn't racist? Are you serious? That's like the trifecta. They're armed, they're religious, and they're a cult. And they're in Montana! But Destroy All Humans isn't afraid to lampoon and mock and just have a voice of its own. Some of my favorite moments I had with the game are just reading the minds of the NPCs. You can lock onto an NPC and scan their mind to read their thoughts and usually get something wild in return. One woman was on the verge of punching her boss if he slapped her butt one more time. One scientist I scanned wanted to prove mind control can work by starting a cable news network. Gee, I wonder which one they're referring to. And a mayor wondered if anyone noticed he was wearing women's panties. The game gets weird and loves it. There's a handful of largish open areas that you unlock by completing main missions, and after completing that mission you can run around and look for probes to collect and usually a few arcadey side missions to do. You'll get experience points for both, and you can use that to upgrade Crypto's ship or weapons, but you know, the upgrades really don't make a substantial difference one way or the other. I would have preferred the option to upgrade maybe Crypto's health or his jetpack, which is really fun to use, but what are you gonna do? It's pretty straightforward stuff, nothing really to write home about. Most missions are simple, go to point A and kill a thing. Sometimes you'll be tasked with hopping into your ship and blowing up an entire city block, but the ship really isn't as fun to fly as it should be. It moves too slowly and doesn't really have a lot of health. I mean, what is the point of being an advanced alien life form if a few missiles can take me down? The final side mission of the game was nearly unbeatable because apparently Crypto's ship is made from paper mache and Furon spit. The ground combat, on the other hand, is fun and responsive. You can shoot people with a few different weapons, like an electric gun thingy, a probe gun majogger, a glorified grenade launcher type doohickey, and this thingy, which was probably my favorite. You can also just make their heads explode and collect their brain stems for some extra XP, or you can use your superior Furon brain power to lift people up and toss them around like ragdolls. The big baddies of the game are called Majestic, a shadowy group of string pullers who know the Furons are here and are absolutely determined to stop them. Quite a few missions in the game task you with being stealthy instead of running and gunning, which I didn't expect in a game with the word destroy in the title. Often you'll have to assume the identity of someone by way of hologram, which is another trick you have in your arsenal. While you're disguised, you have to sneak around while steering clear of any high-level enemies that can see through your disguise and slip into a base or laboratory to destroy or collect information. These missions are fun and all, but if you fail an objective or die, prepare for some old-school gaming annoyances. You first have to travel back to the mothership, then select the mission again, then load back into the area and start from the beginning of the mission. And while most missions aren't overly difficult, some, especially the stealthy ones, require perfect runs. One mistake or a bit of bad luck and boom, back to the start. It's an unnecessary and unfortunately all too common design flaw of older games, made even more infuriating when it isn't even your fault. I would honestly say about half of my mission failures had nothing to do with me actually failing. One mission needed me to mind control a guard and get him to open a gate, but the gate wouldn't open, it was glitched. I could have flown over the gate with Crypto's jetpack, but doing so would have meant losing my disguise and risking mission failure. I had to restart. Another mission had me tailing a scientist, but he kept getting hit by cars and dying. I had absolutely no control over his movements. I was at the mercy of the game's AI, and that is unacceptable. Luckily, most of the missions are fine and often fun and don't really have these problems, but when they do arise, they are infuriating. You're usually just blowing something up, or throwing cows, or assuming someone's identity and blaming commies for everything you don't like, and just having a gay old time. On the whole, the mission design is pretty standard stuff. I was hoping for more variety, honestly. Even all the side missions are just generic races and destroy X in X minutes type of filler. I mean, they're still fun though, mostly because controlling Crypto was fun and responsive, but so much more could have been done. The time period and mocking tone of the plot and dialogue are almost in contrast to the play-it-safe mission design. It's a shame they didn't do more with this. Maybe in the sequel? I guess I'll have to give that one a try too. If you haven't noticed by now, the game really isn't much of a looker. I'm playing this on a PS4 Pro via Sony's unfortunately abandoned PS2 Classics, and the bump to higher resolutions does not do this game any favors. I mean, it gets the job done. It's not painful to look at, but the pop-in, the draw distance, the texture work, they just don't hold up. I mean, thankfully, the art style and the time period are unique enough that even 14 years later, it kind of makes up the difference in style alone. It's a short game too, especially if you skip the side missions and collectibles and just burn straight through the main missions. You can probably complete it in 6 to 8 hours, but it's a mostly enjoyable 6 to 8 hours. There are some annoying old-school holdovers, like the aforementioned lack of checkpoints and some butt-ugly graphics, but overall, I still had a good time with it. It's not Pandemic's best game, but it's a worthy addition to their catalog nonetheless. Unfortunately, the only game in this series I did manage to play was the one that destroyed the franchise for good.